Hello and welcome to Not Alone. I'm your host, Tony, and we were just talking about the fourth gift of the Spirit, Fortitude. And just to quick recap, Maria, could you give us a quick recap?
Yeah, so we talked about the definition of fortitude. It's a cardinal virtue, the fourth virtue of the Holy Spirit. And we said that fortitude is like courage and to be in front of everything that you're scared of. And it also goes hand in hand with perseverance.
And we also talked about in familial relationships to have fortitude, because family is the structure of all society.
That's true.
But also branching into that, in society itself, we see very strong examples of fortitude in like the Olympics or sports. Like so many times in the Olympics, you'll see like, oh, this woman is like too old to be in the Olympics and she gets really good medals, you know, or this person has this disability in their leg or something, and they're like able to achieve such great things. And so also what I read in one of the selections my grandma gave me was this quote. It was what was it? How fortitude is so important that the actual greatest disability you can have is just a lack of commitment to it. Yeah, just like a complete like lack of commitment. Yeah.
I think specifically like in my life, I know I've seen like a lot of times where like commitment is so absolutely key to what you can do, because when you're committed to something and you're really putting forth like a ton of effort, that's when you see the great things happen. And like we were talking about it with the Olympics, that's when you see these people like doing crazy things that nobody ever thought we could do, because they just had the commitment and the strength and the fortitude to try it, even though it's maybe scary, you know, it's going to be hard sometimes, pushing yourself, training, that's all like very hard to do. That takes courage to go against, you know, what your body wants to go, like sleep, you know, something like that. It takes courage.
I used to do cross country. I did it for like 5 years. It was absolutely the worst for me. It was so bad, but I absolutely learned so much from it, because I realized as soon as I walk, you know, like I'm in a race, as soon as I walk, I'm going to walk for the rest of it. And so thinking about that in your mind is so hard to just like wrap your mind around this concept. Like it's just a complete betrayal of self, you know, like self-perseverance, you know. You just want to persevere, but you also want to preserve yourself. And so that's something that's so key to fortitude, is that you have to give part of yourself for a cause.
A lot of willpower.
For the right,
I think too, like you were saying, Jacob, before, I think it's so beautiful because fortitude for us is so different than anyone else's fortitude, because we always find the strength in God. And we always, every day, like you are searching for God. And so each moment of your life, with an athlete, like they have those times where they might be in their 80s and they might still be doing stuff, but there is a point when that ends. And with us, it's a constant battle and a constant struggle for God, which is so beautiful.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And like with, you know, there has to be that center on God, you know, because there's some sports and some athletes who put all their worth of themselves in, you know, their sports or their talents or whatever. But ultimately, when it comes to it, you know, it's about God. It's not about ourselves.
Absolutely.
But that's a really good way to train for that, because when you're learning how to deny yourself and to train and to commit yourself to something, all you have to do is change that commitment towards, you know, the highest good, God, and
I
then
think
you'll have the strength and fortitude to like persevere through those trials.
So, Jacob, your main thing is, so just to give some background on Jacob, is he's an incredibly gifted musician, but his main instrument is drums, and he's 100 times better than both Nigel and I. He's so good. He's got crazy stuff, but
Thank you, Tom.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit. How is like this drum practicing? How is that an example? How is like an instrument or something to learn? How is that an example of fortitude?
I think in order to really master, you know, something, there has to be a lot of time put into it. And I think that especially happens with instruments, and it might just be in my experience, but it takes a lot of time to master it. And there's a lot of different things. And specifically with drums, there's a lot that you can do with drums.
There's 100 different things.
All about, you know, there's practicing hand technique, there's limb independence, which is like, you know, using all 4 different limbs at once, doing different things. So there's just like, there's many different realms of what you can practice, and it takes time. It takes a lot of time. And so I think working with perseverance and fortitude in that is just, you know, just setting aside that time and not being afraid to try new things, you know, and not being afraid, you know, to take big opportunities that, you know, might be out of your comfort
Yeah.
level.
Comfort
But like
zone.
just taking those opportunities, I think is super important, and also having the perseverance to work through practice times, because that's
Yeah.
That's
big.
great.
Yeah. This is so interesting to me because I probably shouldn't say this, but before this episode, I always thought that Fortitude was more in line with just like the faith. But how you guys are saying it is so cool, because it shows how in everyday situations, like I was saying before, in everyday situations, you have the ability to practice fortitude. And
Absolutely,
for me,
yeah.
I was more thinking about it as like something extreme, like martyrs, or like,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like standing up for your faith, or you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like the way you build up to that is through the little things in your life, like
Exactly.
practicing the drums, building that perseverance. And like,
Exactly.
yeah.
So
But I
true.
do think in our daily life, although we do have like the little trials like that we have to overcome, like you guys were
Right.
saying, especially with faith, we always have something that comes up. And I think that's why as Catholics, we're not meant to be comfortable. Like you were saying, we're not supposed to be in an area where we're just like around Catholic people, you know, which is, it's
Yeah.
good. But after you become strong, you're called to go out and evangelize and help other people.
Yeah.
And I remember being at school, and something that was hard for me was being in the cafeteria surrounded by hundreds of kids and doing the sign of the cross. And it's like something so simple, and I've heard
get
other
that.
people say it too, but it was just like, you just feel like everyone's looking at you, and then they're all like, what is she doing, you know? And it's something so
Right.
simple, but little things like that, or if you're in public and saying a prayer, or my mom would always say or do the sign of the cross if we crossed, or if we drove past the abortion clinic or something like that. And little things like that really start to show people, and it's you standing up even though it might make you uncomfortable, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know if
That's
you
a
guys have
beautiful
ever
example.
experienced
Yeah,
anything
exactly.
like that.
Oh, yeah.
But
You guys ever had any experiences where you have to use like fortitude and prudence to like guide your decisions? And
Yeah, it's really interesting how you said that. Like we're called, like when we become strong, we're called to evangelize to other people, like those who don't believe, or those who are
Aren't as
lukewarm,
strong,
or
yeah.
aren't as strong.
we're not
And like that's really interesting because we don't only have to evangelize through words, but we can also do it by example. You know.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's the most strongest way to evangelize, if we do it through example. And like we don't have to like, we could say words, but the most important thing is by example.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like the Bible says, like, you'll be known as my disciples
yeah.
by the
Yeah.
way you love one another.
Exactly.
That's like the greatest
that's true.
example, I think.
Can I
Yeah.
ask, has there been like any moment in your life when that happened? And more specifically, like with
Yeah,
the
of
faith, I
course.
guess.
Yeah, so like for example, for high school, I went to a public school, and like I was the only at least it seemed like I was the only practicing Catholic there, and then I would share my faith with the people around me, and like these people would be like, "Oh, you're so Catholic, you're so religious. Like, why are
Yeah.
you like that? Like, like what are you doing? Whatever."
You'd be like the token Catholic.
Yeah,
person.
and then
exactly.
I was like called a prude or something.
Yeah, exactly.
I know,
Not
and
the
then
worst name,
yeah.
but it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and then that brought me down, obviously, but I was like, no, I can't listen to these people, like this is my faith. I have to truly like stick to what I believe in.
Yeah.
So it is hard, and you do need fortitude to continue showing your faith and expressing it in the middle of, just in the middle of people who don't believe,
Absolutely. I
And that
think
really
that's
does
one of the main
require
struggles.
perseverance to continue, like to get back up after, you get called on or something.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think it's hard too, because even you see, like with our friends, I'm sure you guys have gone through this, but even friends nowadays, if they're Catholic, they still have so many views that are against your own.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Yeah.
in college, even I would constantly be asked to go out and do stuff, and I would have to say no. Like, I don't believe in that. I can't. And it was so
Yeah,
awkward, because they were
exactly.
like, it's nothing bad. But then I'm like,
that's exactly
it's
happened
not.
to me
Yeah,
too.
it's very awkward. Yeah. I remember
Yeah.
one time my sister said she was going to the chapel. It was at like 10 at night. And she saw a huge group of her friends going over to one of the bars in town. And they were all like, Monica, come with us. It will be so fun.
Yeah.
And she wanted to go so badly. And she was like, oh, I could just come back and do adoration later. And then she was like, no, I committed to this. I have to go.
Wow,
And she was like,
that's
I'm going to
good.
set an example.
That's
and she,
really
That's
yeah,
awesome,
which
yeah.
is, it's so hard. But little things like that where it's just like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
going to be with God right now.
Yeah.
And then that can come later.
Yeah,
I know we already
exactly.
passed the season of Lent, but I think Lent is a great opportunity to exercise fortitude too in your commitments
that's
and
true.
what you've chosen to do.
Yeah.
That's very true.
Yeah, that's
I wanted to also mention this passage because we mentioned Bible passages earlier, but it's the passage of the narrow gate, because that's such a great example for fortitude as well. It's like you can't pass like by the wide gate. It's a narrow gate that you pass through, and that's a difficult thing to do, and you have to have fortitude and perseverance and prudence even. And then we were also mentioning earlier, like what is one of the greatest virtues? Like which one is the head of all, you know? But I don't think it works exactly that way. Besides like maybe like the cardinal virtues and like the 3, faith, hope, and love. But also working in tandem with all the other ones. I think fortitude is one of the strongest virtues we can have because it just solidifies our commitment to all the others as well.
That's true.
Yeah. You know what? Okay,
Right.
this is so random, but you know what I was just thinking?
Yeah.
Tony and I were talking about humility
Uh-huh.
just a little while ago. And it really does play right into that because through using God as your strength and finding courage in him, you are totally, like you guys were saying before, you're denying yourselves. And through that, you're being so humble because at that moment, you're saying, I'm not courageous enough to do this.
Yeah, God
But
is
through
bigger.
you, God is bigger. And like only through you can I do this.
That's
you know?
beautiful, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great connection, yeah.
Yeah, so it's all of the virtues, I really think, you know, just
Yeah, they all
in different
come
ways.
together.
It's kind of hard to like pin one because
Yeah,
they all
yeah.
build off of each other. I was talking about my youth minister with this, and just talking about the fruits of the Holy Spirit, and also just like different virtues. You know, when you're building on one virtue, like a lot of times a bunch of different virtues, you know, you
Yeah.
get better and better
Which
at
is
all
so
those things
helpful.
because they all interconnect with each other.
Yeah.
You know.
Thank God. Can you imagine having to work on each one?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's
it's
You know what
Sure.
I actually did just think is the greatest is love. So that is the greatest virtue,
yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
The greatest virtue is love. But
That's true.
Yeah, in general, I think to build that virtue of love, you have to also build all the other virtues as well. You have to exercise them in tandem with this. So yeah, there's not really a like one like prudence. You know, like
Yeah.
prudence is a great virtue as well, but it's just so vast everything that you can talk about with virtues in general. But let's keep going. Fortitude. Because that's what we chose today. What were we saying about fortitude?
Well, I think when you were talking about Lent, that just struck to me kind of the symbol of the cross. Because that's, you know, Lent is coming into the preparation of time of Easter, but also that time of Good Friday, you know, and that cross is like so important to our faith.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
literally
It's so symbolic
entire faith
of
hinges
fortitude,
upon
yeah.
Christ dying on the cross. And so, like, I was just thinking about how much fortitude that would take Jesus, because, you know,
Absolutely,
we
yeah.
know from the agony in the garden, you know, he's like sweating blood thinking about what's going to happen. And that must have been like the scariest thing literally ever. I mean, like we can't have any experiences
Yeah.
that
Literally, no.
Exactly.
get even
Yeah.
close to what that would feel like.
Yeah.
And all for the sake of another person's sins. You know, like
Exactly.
God is completely perfect. He's completely sinless, all for the sake of us. He like faced that hard temptation, that trial, you know, and even in the agony in the garden, like sweating blood because
Yeah.
it was so, that must have been so scary.
Exactly.
You know what got him like to do it, to do what's right, even though it's hard, is fortitude.
Yeah.
And so like that example of the cross is like I think really important.
Yeah. Well, and if you
That's
look,
so
even when
true.
you're saying the rosary, the third mystery, the fruit of the mystery is moral courage. And I think that's one of the most important things. And then I think there's final perseverance, which
Yeah.
is like all in line. So like you're saying, like the cross is literally, it just encompasses everything, all of the virtues and everything that we're fighting for.
Yeah.
And you can just see God like throughout his life, or throughout that moment, Christ's life, all of those virtues coming to light, and each struggle that he went through, and how we can act on that in our own personal lives.
Yeah, and you see the reward after when
Yes.
Easter comes and all the
Yeah.
joy, and you know, like literally us being saved by God.
Yeah.
That was his reward for him. Like, you know,
Yeah.
like it was like he saved us,
Yeah.
and that's just
Wow,
like
that's true.
there's
Yeah.
rewards to that. It's not just, you know, it's not just like persevering and then eventually you're just gonna be left off with nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, there's that's an example. See Christ as an example of what we're called to be like.
Yes.
And so, like, when he goes to the cross and then Easter, you know,
Yes.
is the celebration
Well, okay.
of that.
And another thing which is so cool, kind of going back, I keep going back to what you're talking about, but it all just makes so much sense, is how he had to persevere until the very end of his life. Even though he was God, like you were saying, there is that moment when you're rewarded, but he didn't have like at the very end of his life, and that's what we have to look forward to as well, you know, like we can't be living for each moment. And I talked to so many people on the phone where they're going through so much, and it's hard because we're so young and we haven't gone through a lot yet.
Yeah.
But if we really live for that moment at the very end of our life, then everything
heaven,
else will, the
eternal reward.
the eternal
Exactly.
reward. Yeah.
Exactly. Well,
Exactly.
that's great to end off that segment. But yeah, fortitude is such a expansive topic to talk about. Like coming into this, I was like, fortitude. Okay, I have to
I
look up
know.
very specific things, you
Yeah.
know. But yeah, this is a very broad topic.
It's so exciting too.
Yeah.
Such
All right. Well, we'll see you on the next topic after this quick break. You are not alone. Bye.